Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The Ogre Kingdoms are here to burn away the corruption that is Nurgle in this domination-style game. As we have for the Ogres, they are going to be bringing in a couple of Man-Eaters with those Ogre pistols. They're going to be getting some pretty decent range support. And we're going to be seeing for the Lord, and here we have a Tyrant and a Firebelly. So for that Tyrant, he is just going to be bringing Foe Seeker, but he also does come with that Arsebelcher, which gives -8 leadership in an AoE, as well as Snacks, which gives him regeneration while in melee, even if it is only 0.1% per second. And as for the Firebelly, he's going to be rolling in with his Fire Breath and his Explosion ability to help him get out of any tough situations, as he has Fireball, Flaming Sword of Ruin, and the Burning Head, especially with all that fire damage, could be helped to kind of mitigate the healing that Nurgle is going to be able to give to its own troops. And it also does have the Rag Banner, which gives +4 leadership in an AoE. And of course, he does have a nice little bit of flame resistance, being that Firebelly that he is. For the rest of the units, we just have a couple of Gnoblar Trappers going to be kind of poking out front. And that's going to be it for the Ogres. Now, as for the forces of Nurgle, they are going to be helmed by an Exalted Great Unclean One, who is going to bring in his full selection of spells and abilities. So that is going to be the Blight Swarm. We have Stream of Corruption, Miasma of Pestilence, Curse of the Leper, Rancid Visitations, as well as Blight Boil and Fleshy Abundance, which in an AoE, this thing, or when overcast, this is an AoE spell, so it does quite a bit of healing, especially with how much HP that all of the Nurgle forces have. That is going to be rather nice to have. Also, he is a walking Mortis engine when he is in melee. He comes in with a whopping 12,620 in terms of HP. He's going to be supported by 3 Plague Bearers of Nurgle. These guys have very low armor, but they have 1100 or 11,600 in terms of total HP. So that is quite a lot of health to kind of chunk through. And then in the trees, we have a couple of Nurglings and some Chaos Furies who are, for the time being, set to ground mode to kind of avoid any of the ranged that the other side is going to be able to bring, just kind of keeping them hidden in the trees. But that is going to be it for both sides. So kind of slim pickings for the Ogres, not a whole lot of units. So they're going to be kind of pushing up here to kind of assert their dominance on that center point with their range. They have nothing right now to really kind of get into melee, so they're going to be trying to avoid that for the time being. Some Nurglings are going to be sent to cap 3, just kind of take that point. Very cheap unit, so not a whole lot lost with them. The other one is going to be kind of pushing forward, and even these guys do have 8,400 in terms of total HP. And it sounds like we have some reinforcements coming in on both sides. We have some more Plague Bearers coming in for the Nurgle forces, and then on to the other side, we are going to be seeing some Gnoblars going to be coming in to give at least a little bit of that front line. They are going to have quite a ways to go, because right now the Ogres are very susceptible to the Nurgle forces just kind of pushing right on through, really kind of banking on the whole fact that the Nurgle forces are pretty slow. So they're just trying to kind of use that time that they're going to be given to kind of set themselves up and get whatever damage they can. I mean, even these Man-Eaters, though, they are pretty formidable in terms of melee. They have 110 weapon strength, armor piercing, so they are no slouches there. So you do not want to underestimate those forces. They're not some easy range unit that you can jump on top of and kind of shut them down very quickly. And of course, they do have that nice little fire while it's moving, as they're going to be getting some shots in, doing some nice poke damage to the Exalted Unclean One, and getting some hits in onto those Nurglings on the sides as well. Nurgle forces are going to be kind of using the tree line, though, to kind of block at least some of the incoming fire, as the Trappers are going to be getting some shots in themselves, hitting these units off on the flank, as Nurgle kind of looks to kind of take that point on, or take that ridge in the tree line, and then kind of move forward. We do have those Gnoblars are actually going to be going towards that last cap point, while the other reinforcements, as we have a couple more Gnoblars, going to be kind of pushing in to help with that front line, as they're going to be taking a nice burning head, though, right through the trees. Going to be doing some damage, but that is a lot of HP to chunk through, so it's not going to be doing quite as much damage, or at least noticeable damage, as you may have liked. The Gnoblars are going to be getting some shots in, and it looks like the Man-Eaters are going to be kind of pulling back behind their own Gnoblar Trappers to get some shots in, as the Tyrant is going to be charging in, the Firebelly as well. We're going to be getting some healing, though, off on to the Exalted Great Unclean One by the looks of things, as he does cast Fleshy Abundance, going to be quickly healing himself up, as the shots coming in from those Man-Eaters definitely needs quite a bit of forces to really bring that down, because already up to full health and then some. All these shots just going to be fueling that healing, and these units going to be kind of pulling back back as that nice little explosion. Going to be doing quite a bit of damage to those Nobblar Trappers. Not really doing a whole lot to those Man-Eaters, but those Nobblar Trappers take a ton of damage and are going to be routing very quickly as the Plague Bearers do kind of charge in on this frontal point as well. Going to be shutting down at least some of the range from these Nobblar Trappers, and they shouldn't have too much of a problem dealing with them. And a nice Fire Breath going to be arcing its way out from that Fire Belly, doing some damage to these Plague Bearers. There is a ton of HP in the center formation, as now the chaff units are going to be kind of getting into this point. Some more Nobblar Trappers as well. We have some more reinforcements coming in on the backflank, as we have a Stonehorn with the Harpoon Launcher is going to be waddling its way on forward, as we can kind of swing around, see what Nurgle is going to be kind of bringing on its back flank, as we have some Chaos Furies still sitting in the tree line there, while some more Nurglings, while all the Plague Bearers are really doing the heavy lifting here, and they're doing a pretty decent job kind of trying to push through all of these units. But that Great Unclean One has just taken a ton of damage from both of these Man-Eaters, who are just continuing to just shoot down that very large target there, as it tries to kind of get into what melee it can to kind of get that drain. But those shots are just raining in, doing a bunch of damage. Plague Bearers slowly but surely kind of trying to come in and push these Man-Eaters out of position to kind of allow that Great Unclean One a little bit of breathing room. But for the time being, that Great Unclean One is just taking a vicious pounding from all of these Man-Eaters, and now especially with that Stonehorn coming on in with that Harpoon Launcher, that is going to be doing a bunch of damage there. So it is going to be bonus versus infantry, so it'll very help with all of these Plague Bearers, but not necessarily, and that Harpoon is going to be getting some nice damage in, and it looks like we're going to be getting a few spells coming off from that Exalted Great Unclean One. But it is going to be probably a little too late, as it is just getting melted down, as we're going to be getting a Fireball also arcing its way out, and it is going to smack right into the back of the Exalted Unclean One. Very hard to miss when something is that large, and it is going to be unstable now, slowly disintegrating, and there is going to be no saving it at this point, as all of the Plague Bearers just trying to kind of push in to the center point. Stonehorn as well going to be kind of just mucking things up. At this point, it's going to be very hard for the Nurgle forces to bring down the Stonehorn. They're going to need quite a bit of heavy hitters in order to do so. Nurglings are going to be kind of coming out of the tree line now, looking to kind of get into these back units to try and shut down these Nobblar Trappers, who have been able to kind of get some good shots in throughout, as these Nurglings and those Plague Bearers doing a lot of good damage so far, as that Burning Head continues to arc its way out. And here comes some more of those heavy hitters. The Spawn of Nurgle are going to be waddling out, as we also have a Soul Grinder coming in, and those should be able to do some decent damage to that Stonehorn, both of which are kind of very large targets, so they should be able to kind of at least get around that bonus versus infantry and melee that the Stonehorn does have. But 417 missile strength going to be pretty hard, and 110 armor as well. That is going to be the hard thing for Nurgle to really crack on through. But Nurgle just continues to try and kind of push in with all of their units. They have lost quite a bit of their units for the time being. Much of these Plague Bearers have fallen to just the tide of the Ogres, as we're going to be getting in some Ogre Bulls as well, kind of coming in some more monstrous units to really muck things up. These guys have some decent weapon strength themselves, and we also do have some Ogre Bulls with dual weapons who do have a bonus versus infantry, and the shots raining in from that Soul Grinder getting some decent work in. And off onto point 3, we're actually going to be seeing these Chaos Furies and these Nurglings combating some Nobblar Trappers who try to kind of sneak their way in to point 3, but Nurgle is going to be stopping them as they do approach. Beast of Nurgle also going to be summoned in with some Forsaken as well for a little bit more heavy hitters, trying to take the center point, as Nurgle is quickly losing quite a bit. I mean, even the Spawn already down to half health off of that initial charge, and things are not looking all too great for them, as they do try and bring down these Man-Eaters. But as I said before, these Man-Eaters, they do so much damage. The Spawn and Nurgle do have poison, but yeah, these Man-Eaters are having no problems at all dealing with those Spawn, and they are just quickly chunking them down in terms of their HP, and they should pose no more threat to the rest of the Ogre forces, who have a very dominant center position here at this point, as we have some more Nurgle forces kind of slowly winding their way in. Beast of Nurgle could be making a beeline for that Tyrant. He does have that poison still in effect from that Spawn that is sitting there, and then Spawn, or the Beast of Nurgle, can be trying to bring down the Lord, but again, this Lord not really all too important here in the grand scheme of things for the Ogre. Firebelly also going to be mixing things in, swinging that flaming Warhammer of his, as we do get the Forsaken kind of coming on in, and these guys should be able to do some decent work. They have poison themselves, as they're just going to be trying to whittle things down, but they're going to be met by a charge of these Ogre Bulls, who will be able to beat down these Forsaken very, very quickly with their bonus versus infantry. And you can just see that HP already dropping fairly quickly, and that Soul Grinder getting some shots in throughout this fight, but really I think is definitely needed in the center engagement. But that Beast of Nurgle has been able to do some decent damage to that Firebelly. Firebelly is getting very low, while the Beast of Nurgle is unstable at this point, starting to lose HP from that lack of leadership, but it might be able to bring down the Firebelly. At least is able to rout that, so that is it for the magic from the Ogres, as they did try and get, as they did actually get that Flaming Sword of Ruin off before it did end up routing. But now that Beast of Nurgle is going to be falling to the wayside. It does look like that Firebelly did either completely die or was shattered outright off the field. But this is now going to be still a very strong position for the Ogres, as they're going to be sitting very confidently off onto the fringes, firing away with their Lead Belchers, and their Stonehorn is just kind of sitting there with that protection, making sure that nothing gets any ideas into their head that they can take on those Lead Belchers, who are now just pummeling away at the Soul Grinder, doing a lot of damage to them, using their superior ranged firepower, as Nurglings are just trying to try and swarm through the Ogre positions. But these Nurglings just not going to have any damage to be dealt against the forces of the Ogres, as the actually those Nobbler Trappers still alive and well down on that point. It looks like they are going to be slowly capping that point 3, or those Nurglings are actually going to be trying to hold that back against them. Some Plague Bearers as well going to be kind of coming in for some reinforcements on their side, as we do have more Lead Belchers coming in for the Ogres off on the far flank, as the shots continuing to rain in. And we take a look at the center position, it is very dominantly held by the Ogres. Nurglings are going to be slowly disintegrating bit by bit as more try and flood themselves in, but it is going to be not enough, as we do have a Cultist of Nurgle, though, is going to be kind of making its way through, trying to get on to these other players, kind of trying to circumnavigate that Stonehorn with that little old thing. Not going to be much more than a little nuisance to those guys, as these Man-Eaters, having used up all of their ammunition, are now kind of pushing forward and causing some trouble with that Soul Grinder and those Nurglings, and just seeing how well they do in terms of just melee, as they're putting on a pretty good show for themselves, as the Soul Grinder is going to be teleporting on out, used up all of its ammunition, can be trying to get some of the funds back and try and bring in some more units, but this time is ticking very quickly against the Nurgle forces, and with their speed they're not going to be able to really mount too much of an offensive here, as the Ogres are having a very, very dominant position at this stage in the fight, as the Lead Belchers just going to be a very strong deterrent, as they have 2 of those units now going to be just kind of sitting back with tons of ammunition to spare, and they have the vast superiority in terms of overall numbers. And if you take a look at the reinforcement supplies as well, they have over 4,000. So they're going to be able to respond very quickly to anything that the Nurgle forces are going to be bringing their way. So I think that is going to be pretty much all she wrote. Nurgle did try valiantly to push into the Ogre formation, but just the superior in terms of just mass. But we do have a little push off into point 1, as they are going to be trying to push back these Nobblers, quickly breaking them. Cultists and those Plague Bearers were able to actually that is a summon of the Plague Bearers, as the Cultist does kind of come in there, as we are going to be getting some reinforcements. A ton of Nobbler Trappers are going to be making sure that that point does not fall, as they kind of just mass spawn in and charge down the hill. But again, it is just going to be a little too late for the Nurgle forces. They just don't have enough to push into this point 2, as there's just way too much mass and HP. I mean, the Stonehorn is going to be way too much for them to even deal with, but that is going to be all she wrote. So let's take a look at that after battle report, as the Ogres definitely had that superior ranged firepower. These Man-Eaters, 3,000, 4,500 on that other one, definitely doing a lot of damage. I mean, a lot of that damage was dealt to that Exalted Great Unclean One. Generally one of the matchups that you don't want to be bringing such a very large target, because the Ogres have some very strong DPS in terms of range firepower. Both the Nobbler Trappers not doing all too great. Firebelly did respectable work, getting 1,500 himself, and the Tyrant coming in nice and dirty cheap with 706. For the reinforcement pool, Stonehorn getting 1,000 and still had plenty of ammunition to spare. Both of the Lead Belchers got some decent damage in, but they still had quite a bit in reserve. But otherwise, there was just tons of Ogres on the reserves. Didn't even have to bring in too many of them, and all of these Nobblers not really doing all too much other than just kind of slowing down the Nurgle forces. As for the Nurgles, not a whole lot of damage on their initial one. Of course, these Plague Bearers actually did rather well, 1251 on them, 230 and 252 on the Chaos Furies. As for the rest of it, the Forsaken actually did some pretty good work, getting 932, so a few more of those actually probably would have done quite a bit better than the Plague Bearers, who I do believe cost a bit more in terms of total gold spent. Soul Grinder, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole lot of good targets. Is a lot better against more tightly packed infantry. So against the rather monstrous infantry that the Ogres do tend to bring, that Soul Grinder isn't going to be quite as useful in this engagement. Beast of Nurgle was able to at least deal with the spell casting of the Ogre forces, but otherwise that is pretty much going to be it. As the Ogres, they didn't need any of those overpowered units, no Gorgers, no Iron Blasters for them. They're able to do it with just raw firepower, especially those two Man-Eaters. I mean, those were the heroes of the day for sure for the Ogres, getting just a combined 7,500 between them. That is an insane amount of damage from just 2 units. And that is going to be all she wrote here for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.